What's up, y'all? Welcome to our sixth episode for our interview series. Today, we will be interviewing Justin Goldman. Justin Goldman is a man of many talents. Justin has been a regional scout and mentor for the national team development program for USA Hockey. He also wrote articles for NHL.com and used to be a hockey analyst at Mile High Sports Radio. Justin is one of the largest goalie influencers and educators in the world, as he is the founder and owner of the Goalie Guild. The Goalie Guild is the world's only 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to educating goalies and coaches at all levels. They also have Lift the Mask, which is a program that I believe started in 2018, helping goalies connect and work and embraces mental health and tries to bring more awareness to it. And then on top of all of that, Justin is an emergency backup goalie for the Colorado Avalanche, and he has written and self-published 6 books. Thank you, Justin, for coming on. We really appreciate you taking time out of your day to talk with us.
No problem. It was awesome to hear from you. Like I said, your brother and I were longtime school buddies, and like I said, anything I can do to support, Jesuit students, 100% here for it. So thanks for having me on.
Yep, it's great to have you. So, just to ask, what was it like writing and publishing your own books?
It was definitely a grueling process, right? It takes a lot of self-reflection and a lot of patience to publish your own book. And for me, it was just an unbelievable journey, digging into the minds of all these amazing goalies that I grew up watching play, and are having success at the NHL and the highest levels right now. So really for me, it was more of just going on like a learning adventure, right? It wasn't really about how many books I was going to sell, or was I going to get a publishing deal with an actual publishing company. It was all about learning and digging into the mind of NHL goaltenders. When I first set out on this journey, back in 2012, there were no books on the mental side of the position for goaltenders. So I saw that there was an opportunity to, help inspire the next generation of goalies, and even goalies at my age in my 30s, right? And that was really the main focus of going on that writing adventure, was to just, provide an educational resource for young goalies that maybe don't have access to, high level training, or access to, talk with professional goaltenders. So it was a really fun journey. It was a really grueling journey. Like I said, I didn't have the luxury of an editor, or a publishing company, so it was really just kind of learning on my own and relying on family members and friends in the journalism industry to provide some of that support. So the first book really did take a long time. It was almost 2.5 years from the time I decided to sit down and write this first book to the time when we actually published it. So that's really what it was all about. A lot of inner reflection and tearing up notes and going back and trying to find the best questions I could possibly ask, because the opportunity to actually sit down with an NHL goaltender, and dig into their personal lives a little bit, is few and far between. So I just wanted to take advantage of the opportunity and make the most of it, because I knew it was probably a one shot deal, right? And so I put a lot of time into thinking about the best questions I could ask each goalie, making sure I did my research on each goalie, and just approaching them with gratitude. I think that was one of the most important things for me. Is, again, I wasn't there to pry into their privacy or ask them difficult questions. It was just about learning about how they overcome obstacles, how do they manage the stress, and the pressure of being, the last line of defense for an NHL organization. And I think once the goalies that I interviewed realized that I was in it for the right reasons, to just learn and share their knowledge with younger goalies, they really kind of peeled back the layers a little bit and became more personable with myself. And that's what I think made the book just really authentic, and such a great resource for goalies everywhere.
That's definitely amazing about how you just talked about learning. Was talking about the learning, was there one comment or multiple comments from different goalies that surprised you the most?
Man, there were so many nuggets of wisdom because the questions I tried to ask were not the typical questions that you would ask a goalie, after a game, right? Like after a game, the questions are really geared towards, oh, why did that goal go in, or what could you have done better? It's all those cliche questions that you obviously are used to hearing after a pro sports game, and so there was a wealth of knowledge that came from all of these goalies. But I think what was the most surprising to me is the fact that every goalie that I talked to um, basically had the same mindset, but just had a different way of explaining it. They had different strategies for overcoming the same obstacles. And when I went back and I read all the interviews, I was amazed at how much balance mattered to all of these goalies. And by balance, I mean that it wasn't just hockey, 24/7 all day, every day. They really did put a lot of time and energy into other hobbies, and making sure that they had other interests and took care of their family, had a personal life, outside of playing the game. Because when you play at the highest level, um, you're making a lot of money playing that game, and you are committed to, excellence of the highest degree with your physical skills, as well as your ability to just be a professional, like live that professional lifestyle. So it was really, really eye opening for me back then to realize that they put a lot of they placed a really strong emphasis on other hobbies and having outlets and ways to go and get away from that stress, get away from that grind that they undergo every single day being at the rink. And I think that's what really opened my eyes to the importance of the concept of mental health for an athlete, because you are going to get you are going to get burnt out if your mind is solely on the game of hockey 24/7 and you have nothing else going on in your life. So I think that was the most surprising thing, is that every goalie truly valued balance in their lives and really appreciated the time they spent away from the rink, not thinking about the game. And having that balance actually allowed them to achieve, a high level of success, because again, that's what balance is all about. It gives you the energy you need to go out and dominate, when you are at the rink every day.
So, what allowed you to get in touch with all these great goalies?
I was really fortunate. Growing up in Dallas, I was a huge Stars fan, right? Like the Stars is what got me into hockey in the mid 90s. And I was really fortunate after I graduated from college. This was when social media was starting to become really popular. So this was like the mid 2000s when Facebook was still relatively new and Twitter was just kind of coming to the forefront as like a social media platform. And back then, nobody was really, sharing content or sharing opinions on goalies, right? Like I was probably one of the first platforms on social media to, share insights on goalies. So when I was tweeting about goalies, in the playoffs in the mid 2000s or late 2000s, it was really easy for my brand, the Goalie Guild, and for my name to get out there because, again, nobody else was doing it. And so over the course of about a year, maybe a year and a half of, consistently posting content on social media, a lot of professional goalie coaches started to see my work. And that's what led to some opportunities with, NHL.com and USA Hockey. And one of those goalie coaches actually happened to be the goalie coach for the Dallas Stars. His name is Mike Valley. And I was blown away. He messaged me one day and he was like, "Hey, where did you play growing up? Like you really seem to understand the position very well." And I was like, "Holy crap, like I played some high school hockey in Dallas. I'm not a pro goalie, but I just really love, analyzing goalies and breaking down their movements." And he and I just clicked like that. Like he became my biggest mentor. He was someone that really believed in me despite my lack of pro experience, despite the fact, I was just a high school goalie in Texas. And he gave me the confidence that I needed to continue pursuing, excellence in my role as a goalie scout and a goalie analyst. And he and I worked on these books together. So I was really fortunate to find a mentor, someone who was, coaching NHL goalies at the highest level, someone who was really well respected. And the two of us together basically teamed up, and he went out and actually talked to these goalies and asked if they would be willing to be interviewed by us. And then I would go in and actually conduct the interviews, do the editing, and actually, write the book, and build the manuscript. So it was a little bit of luck, but it was also just, consistent, passion for learning. And I think that's going to be a theme for me, throughout the rest of my life, is if you have that passion for learning and you wake up every day willing to learn something new, there really is no limit to what you can accomplish. And all of those seeds that you're planting every single day is going to put you in a situation where you can be in the right place at the right time, and you do create a little bit of your own luck. And I think that's what it was for me. It was just consistently every day grinding at my passion, which was, scouting goalies. And eventually I finally got noticed, and the right guy came along, and, us together kind of seeing eye to eye on the importance of, mental performance for goalies, and sharing that with younger goalies, is what led to, the beginning of the book writing journey.
So when you were young, who inspired you to be a goaltender?
So yeah, it's a really kind of a funny story. Again, like, growing up in Dallas in the mid 90s, it was just basically started playing street hockey. I grew up in Preston Hollow, and, before I moved to Preston Hollow, I lived on a horse ranch in Parker, Texas, out in the middle of nowhere. And so when I moved to Preston Hollow, and I started to realize like hockey was a sport, and the Stars came to Dallas, Eddie Belfour was the first goalie that really got me, passionate about goaltending. But I also was like a huge Red Wings fan, which was like sacrilege in Dallas at the time, right? And for whatever reason, I don't know why, I loved Chris Osgood, and Chris Osgood was this kind of old school goalie that wore an old school mask, and was just like this pure butterfly goalie that won a lot of games with the Red Wings. And he wasn't the fanciest goalie. He didn't have like the coolest looking gear, or like I said, like he didn't have one of the new age masks that you see now with the paint jobs. But I just loved the fact that he kind of flew under the radar, and he was, an average goalie on like a really good team. And I don't know, I just like gravitated towards his style, loved everything about him, loved watching him play. And Ozzy was the first goalie that, he basically was my idol. Like he was the guy that I looked up to, I wanted to be like. And all the other goalies that I started to discover back when I was really starting to watch the NHL back in the mid 90s, I loved them all. And I think that's why I really gravitated towards scouting, because I saw so many unique skills in every single goalie that I watched, whether it was like Mika Kiprasov from Finland, or, Felix Potvin, who was your, prototypical, Canadian flashy goalie, or it was like a more rough, rugged Eddie Belfour, a guy who was like really physical in the crease, Ron Hextall, like all these like really classic goalies from the mid 90s. I mean, I loved all of them, and that's really what got me passionate about, just strapping on the pads and calling myself a goalie, even though I could hardly skate at the time.
That's definitely amazing about how you mentioned the impact of the Dallas Stars, because they had just come into uh, Dallas. So crazy about that. And then how you started, I was listening to a webinar that you participated in, I think about a month ago. They mentioned how you first came into the hockey world as in through journalism.
Mhm.
So how did you go from being a journalist to where you are now, the founder of the Goalie Guild, and really in depth with like a bunch of goalies?
Yeah, I think when I graduated high school, I knew that writing was one of my biggest skills. I was not the greatest in math, or science, but I was naturally just a really good writer, and so I knew I was going to pursue journalism as a degree. And the transition, Jesuit set me up for success. I mean, it was such a grind, but when I look back on it now, whatever, 20 years later, the education that I got at Jesuit truly set me up to have a successful career, not just in journalism, but in all facets of life. And so I was really, really grateful that, just the teachers that I had, Father Leininger, like some legendary teachers from Jesuit over the years, really, like I said, laid that foundation for me to go to college. And mix in some creative elements of writing to the foundation that I had, like the real good structure to the English language. And so in college, I think it was more about like, okay, I know I want to pursue journalism, but I want to be creative. I don't want to just be like a traditional newspaper journalist. Like, I want to mix in my passion for hockey and goaltending. Like, how do I make this work? And that's what really college was all about. It was, not only finding my identity, but it was really taking the time to, create my own career path. I didn't want to just follow exactly what other people were doing because, again, back then there was no social media really, and there really wasn't any goalie specific analysis out there to be found. And so that was it for me. Again, I think it was a little bit of, being in the right place at the right time, and, graduating when I was 21 years old in 2004. That's when social media really started to become a thing. And so I think, again, it was my ability to be able to take my foundational writing skills, mix in that creativity, and not be afraid to just go for it and pursue something that really hadn't existed yet. And I think when you realize that you've got an opportunity to pursue a career path that may not be like the most obvious or may not be the most popular, but it's something you truly love, it makes it really easy. And for me, it was easy to just mix my love of writing and my natural journalism skills with goaltending. And at the time back then, I didn't think it would actually amount to a career. But, again, it's that old saying of like, you do it a little bit every day, you're planting seeds for a better future. And unknowingly, that's what I was doing. And so, um, really, it was opportunity after opportunity started to come out of the woodworks when I was in college, and I was a junior. So I was really getting into the specialty of, technical journalism and creative writing as my major. The Colorado Eagles, which were a minor league hockey team, just literally landed in northern Colorado where I was going to school, like same town. It was bizarre. It was almost like lightning struck twice, right? Like the Dallas Stars came out of nowhere to Dallas in the mid 90s, and I that's what got me passionate about hockey and got me involved in playing competitively at the high school level. And then my junior year of college, it's like, oh my gosh, a minor league hockey team is coming to Fort Collins, right where the campus is. So the first thing I did was go into my college's newspaper and say, there's a pro hockey team coming to town, and I don't care what you say, but I'm covering them. Like, that's my gig, right? Like, no one's going to take that from me. I want to do it. And I was the first guy to kind of raise my hand and be like, yeah, I'll cover this minor league hockey team. And that was what opened the door for this entire career that I've had. I walked in the door as like a budding, sports journalist, and the Colorado Eagles, being a minor league hockey team, like absolutely loved the idea of having like a junior reporter, and they gave me full access. They gave me the media credential. They gave me the ability to, interview players after the game. And I still have those credentials back there hanging up. That was what started it all for me. And I'm like, to this day, I'm like eternally grateful to the Colorado Eagles organization for allowing me to, have a press credential, and to get that experience as a traditional sports reporter, going into the locker room after games and getting over the nervous energy and going up to the players and asking them questions and not being afraid of, are they going to tell me to buzz off, or are they just going to give me like terrible quotes? I got that experience while I was still in college. So that really continued to kind of keep me ahead of the curve, right? Like, that's one of the great things about Jesuit, right? Is like it's a college prep school, and it's really truly preparing you for college. And then during my junior year of college, it was kind of the same thing again. I was getting this amazing experience hands on in a professional role while I was still studying. And so I think it was a combination of those two things that allowed me to, again, when I did finally graduate and I moved to like the city of Denver, I was not afraid to approach Mile High Sports and say, look, I've been covering pro hockey for a couple years. Is there an opportunity I could do this for the Avalanche? And again, because no one was really doing the social media thing, and I had that experience, I started to become a little bit more diverse with my abilities. And that gave me the edge I needed to get that role with Mile High Sports Radio. And then, like I said, one thing led to another, and it continued to snowball. And so that's kind of how it all went down.
Wow, that's just an amazing story, and that's great that you keep the credentials. And I really like the parallel you mentioned between the Colorado Eagles and the Dallas Stars just kind of coming in.
Yeah, so what's the story behind becoming the emergency backup goaltender for the Colorado Avalanche?
Crazy story. I've been playing, high level beer league hockey here in Denver for many years, and going back to when I first started writing for Mile High Sports Radio and doing some radio broadcasting. um, I was fortunate just being at every single Avs home game. You get to know some of the employees, whether it's like the Zamboni driver or guys that are turning on the lights in the building or doing sound, sound crew, stage crew, fan development, like all these guys that would work at Pepsi Center all the time. One day they invited me. They were like, "Hey, we know you're a goalie. Like, we're gonna have like an employee skate at Pepsi Center. Do you want to skate like on Pepsi Center ice with us? We need a goalie." And I was like, "Holy crap, yeah, that would be amazing. Like, I'd love to skate on an NHL rink." And that's really where it started. Was, I went out there, I played well. They were really happy to have like a decent beer league goalie skating with some employees, and um, I can just remember like that whole night, like it was so hot on that rink. I can't even begin to imagine how actual NHL players do it when there's like 18,000 fans in a building and the lights are on. I mean, I was sweating like crazy and there was nobody in the stands, right? And there were hardly any lights on. And I just remember that experience being one of the coolest hockey experiences I had because I felt like kind of like I was a pro for a little bit, because I was on Pepsi Center ice with a bunch of Avs employees. Obviously, none of the players, but just like, guys that were around the team and worked for the Avalanche organization. And so they kind of accepted me, and I would continue to skate with these guys at Pepsi Center, during the preseason and, during the summer when the ice was still in. And eventually in 2017, so this was probably 5 or 6 years after I'd been skating with these guys, the NHL came down with a rule that said, okay, we've had some issues in the past where two goalies in a game have gotten hurt, and the game has to be paused for like 30 minutes while they figure out who's going to go in, whether it's the goalie coach for that team or they pull a defenseman and have him get dressed in goalie gear. Like it was just a train wreck because, NHL games are televised and they have to fit that game within a certain time frame. So the NHL came down with this new rule where they said, okay, every NHL team, every home game, you have to have someone in the stands who is like a decent enough goalie that has their gear with them that can suit up if one guy gets hurt so that there's always a backup ready to go if that happens. So the NHL came down with this rule in, the fall of 2017 before the season started. And when the Avs heard about it, they called me and they were like, "Hey, this new rule just came out. We've got to scramble and find some guys that can be an emergency backup for us. Do you know anyone that can do it?" And I was like, "I can do it. I'm pretty sure." And so I put my name into the list and I listed, like 5 other goalies here locally that are really good, that filled the requirements. So the 2 requirements were that you had to have played college club hockey or higher, and you've never played a professional game. And I just barely squeezed by because I think I played 3 games for CSU, which was a club hockey team, during my freshman year. So I got really lucky. I just barely was able to, consider myself, put my name on the list. And I submitted the list to the Avalanche, and they submitted that list to the NHL, and the NHL approved us. So that's kind of how it happened. Once again, it was one of those situations where I was in the right place at the right time. Um, I was just good enough to meet the requirements, and I've always stayed really committed to just being the best goalie I can, even though I not playing professionally and I'm just playing quote unquote beer league, competitive beer league hockey. Like I still train, I still take care of my body, I still do all the things I would do if I were playing at a higher level. And the opportunity came along, and I just absolutely jumped at it. And obviously, there were no emergency backup goalies this season due to COVID. And that's been the biggest challenge for me at my age now, 39. That's like ancient in goalie years. So I don't have a lot of years left. But the biggest challenge for me this year has been, how do I stay in shape? How do I stay, how do I keep my eyes in my hands and my skills sharp when I don't have access to ice like I usually do. And so this has been the biggest challenge. And now it's like, okay, we're about to hit the playoffs. Playoffs are like a week away. I expect the rule to still be intact next season, and I just want to make sure I'm prepared for next season in case I get called to come back for another season.
That's definitely a crazy story, but those are the best kind, in my opinion, and yours is definitely the best one.
Yeah, I
That
wish
was
I
really
wish I had a story about, having to suit up or, get called into practice. It hasn't happened yet. There have been a couple of close calls over the past 3 seasons. But it's really cool because every NHL team handles the role differently. Some teams will have, just one guy. It's just one guy. He's at all 42 home games or 41 home games, and that's it. Other teams have, 4 or 5 guys that fill the role, and you split the home games, and that's how it is here in Colorado. There's 5 of us. We're all really good friends. We're all rooting for each other, and we just split those home games. So I think in the 3 years I've done this, I've probably covered about 25 games, close to 30. And yeah, I've never had an emergency pop up where I've had to get suited up or have been called into practice. But you never know; it can happen anytime, anywhere. It's crazy.
well. The Avalanche, I believe, came close last year in the lockdown. I think it was like game 4, 5, 6, and 7 against the Dallas Stars. When I just know I forgot his real name, but Michael Clutchinson, as Austin
Yeah.
called him.
Yeah, it's Hutchinson, but I called him Clutchinson because he
Okay.
was making clutch saves.
Yeah, that was I forgot about that. I mean, I didn't forget about that series, but yeah, it was crazy how, first Grubauer goes down and then Pavel Francouz gets hurt and you're like, man, there's no chance the Avs are going to get anywhere with this third goalie. And Hutchison, like you said, man, he just came up he was so close to pulling off like one of the most epic, sets of games I have seen in the playoffs. And it was heartbreaking for us here in Colorado because we were so close to pulling it off. But then like I say, like, I always kind of battle with that in my mind because the Avs and Stars have been, they've had so many crazy playoff series over the years, ever since I was growing up. And like, I really wanted to see the Avs pull it off, but then at the same time, I was like so pumped that the Stars made it. I'm a huge Ben Bishop fan. I've known him personally for a few years. He was in one of the books that I wrote, and I know he was injured too. And Hudobin just unbelievable in the playoffs, and it was just an awesome series. Like especially if you're a goalie guy, that was an awesome playoff series to watch. So yeah, Clutchinson was great for sure in those games.
And then you've mentioned being ahead of the curve multiple times, and you were really ahead of the curve because you came out with Lift the Mask, a mental health thing. We've definitely seen the rise in mental health, especially during lockdown, but you kind of set the groundwork. So, how did it operate during lockdown this past year?
Yeah, I mean, the Lift the Mask program is really just kind of like a bridge, right? That's how I explain it to people. Where I am not, a mental health therapist. I'm not a professional sports psychologist, but I really love to connect goalies that are struggling with those professionals, and that's really hard just out there in the world. Like, it's not easy for a high school kid that's a goalie that might be struggling with, any sort of issues, whether it's anxiety or depression or suicidal thoughts or whatever. He or she wants to quit. It's really hard for them to find the right type of help. And sometimes they just need, goalies need a little bit of a support system to help them find the right kind of help and just kind of break down those social barriers, because it's not easy to open up. It's not easy to take that initiative to go find a sports psychologist. And that is what Lift the Mask is all about. We just help goalies and goalie parents find the support that they need by letting them know that, like, we're going to give you every resource you possibly could need to find that right type of help. Whether it's like, hey, it might just be a mental skills coach, right? Like, you might just want to improve something like your focus and your consistency. Or it could be like, an actual sports psychologist because you're dealing with anxiety and depression and OCD tendencies. And we just try and break down those barriers by, one, saying like, look, goaltending is so stressful and this is 100% normal. And two, like, don't worry, like, we'll find the right help for you in your area, whether it's, doing an online search or It's a goalie coach that I know that has a sports psychologist in their program, right? Having a sports psychologist in a sports program is becoming more normal, which is great because every program should have one. Because we all go through struggles at different points in a season. Whatever sport you're playing, whatever you're going through, you're gonna hit obstacles, you're gonna hit challenges, and it's amazing to know that we're finally getting to a point where it's like not only is it understood a little bit better, but it's actually accepted, and it's like okay to realize that like you might be going through some tough times and you need someone to talk to, or you know what, you're just not feeling good and you're gonna sit out a game. That should be totally accepted, and coaches and parents and even the players themselves should just be okay with that, because if you try to resist it, you're just going to make things worse. If you try to bottle it up, or mask it in any way, you're just going to make things worse. And that's why I chose that name, Lift the Mask, because it's very easy for a goalie to hide behind that mask and not really show their true emotions. We are conditioned as athletes to hide our emotions because we should always be seen as like these robotic, even keeled, always very steady, consistent athletes, and that's just not reality. Okay, like that's not how humans operate. Like we have ebbs and flows and ups and downs and highs and lows. And I think the more that we kind of advocate for acceptance and understanding that there are going to be good days and bad days, and that goalies are going to struggle with certain emotions and struggle with the pressure of having to stop every puck, the better we're going to be just as a hockey community, and as a sports community, realizing that this happens with all athletes all the time and it's totally okay. And there needs to be, support systems in place to help those individuals when the time comes, because it will come eventually. I thought I was totally impervious to any kind of mental health issue or any kind of, emotional obstacle. And then my mom died back in October very suddenly, and it was the hardest thing I've ever had to go through. And that was a real eye opener for me as well, to just realize like everything can be totally fine one day, and the next day something happens that just pulls the rug from underneath you, and you find yourself dealing with some issues. And so that's really, I think, what Lift the Mask is all about. And yeah, during the pandemic, there's a lot of goalies that are struggling, a lot of athletes that are struggling because we're not with our teammates. We don't have access to our, facilities and our training regimen that we're used to, and we kind of feel lost and disconnected. And so that's, yeah, Lift the Mask has actually, gains a little bit more visibility during the lockout, because goalies know there's a place they can go, whether it's just to vent at 2 a.m. or, they're really looking, like I said, for that professional help. We're here to provide it for them. And that's something I'm really passionate about doing as time goes on.
Yeah, it's definitely a great program. And just to say, we're sorry for your loss for your mother. But um, any way we can help. And just one more thing, you talked about athletes. Of course, I'm just thinking of a different sport, baseball. Drew Robinson, who just hit a homer. Has anyone in other sports contact you to ask you like, hey, how did you set up Lift the Mask, or is that something you've dealt with yet?
Yeah, it's funny. Actually, it was a famous soccer player in Europe. Um, he goes by the name of Cresper, and he read the goalie book. Like he read a goalie book, and he didn't really. He at first, like, someone recommended it to him, right? A yoga instructor over in Europe, who works with goalies, recommended this book to the soccer player. The soccer player read it, and he was like, holy crap, this is like about goalies, but this is actually about all athletes. Like he resonated with a lot of the same obstacles, and like I said, the strategies that goalies have for mental performance, like it definitely transcends all sports. And so the soccer player reached out to me, and he just thought it was the coolest thing ever that, we got goalies to talk about this thing. And so it wasn't necessarily geared directly towards Lift the Mask, but he was really interested in how he could get soccer players to, open up about how they perform mentally, and how they kind of, come up with mental strategies to overcome, anxiety or nervousness or some of the different, challenges that, soccer players try to overcome. So that was really cool for me to just know that, like, yeah, goaltending is like this really kind of niche sport or niche position in a niche sport, and it's like completely different from soccer. But at the end of the day, if you're an elite athlete, you're going through a lot of the same things. You're trying to live up to expectations from fans. You're trying to live up to expectations of a $1 million salary. Like, you're on the road a lot. You're away from your family. Like, you know, you do one wrong thing and everyone hates you, and you do one right thing and everyone loves you. Like, all these different elements of being an elite athlete, like I said, transcend all sports. It's just for goaltending, it's a little bit different because of the nature of the position. But actually learning from other athletes is super, super valuable. And, analogous learning is something that I really love to do. I love learning from like what football quarterbacks are doing. Like, they train at an insanely high level. They've got insane ability to like scan the field and see what's happening in the moment and make split decisions at the drop of a hat, right? So, like, learning from other athletes actually has really helped me mentor and coach goalies at a higher level. And I think it's the same way with other athletes that reach out to me to learn about goalies. It's like it's a foreign thing to them, but when you realize there's similarities there, it actually becomes a really fruitful conversation.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed as a hockey fan myself when a goalie has an amazing game, but then lets in one bad goal and everything turns to it's the goalie's fault, even if it was a shutout beforehand.
See, and that's, it's really important to have that understanding too, because goalies have fragile minds and they have a little bit of fragile egos. Like, they know when they've given up a bad goal, and then all of a sudden, as soon as they realize they've given up a bad goal, what happens? They start thinking about it over and over again. And the next thing you know, they give up 2 goals in a row or 3 goals in a row because their focus isn't on the next shot. It's like, oh crap, I just gave up this bad goal and my defensemen hate me or my coach hates me. So that is the battle. That is the battle of a goaltender, is just finding ways to let go. And again, that transcends all sports, and not just athletes, but human beings in general. Like, it's really easy to get caught up on the mistakes that we make. But if we get too caught up dwelling on the mistakes, you're not focused and you're not in the moment, and you're not going to be ready for whatever comes next.
How do you stay ahead? Well, you're always ahead, but I was reading some articles and I mentioned I think Goalie Guild is starting to get into VR technology for helping goalies. So just how do you stay? And then there's the puck. There's a new system coming out for players. So how do you just stay ahead of all those things and help goalies and coaches out?
Yeah, I mean, I think the fact that I'm still playing and still trying to be the best really helps, right? Again, being 39 years old and just an emergency backup goalie, but you never know when you're going to get that call. Like, you have to make sure you're prepared. And the COVID pandemic has definitely forced goalies to find new ways and creative ways to stay sharp, not just physically, but again, it's all eye hand coordination, it's reaction speed, it's dual tasking, reading plays, pattern recognition, like all of these really important cognitive skills. You don't need ice to train it, like, you don't need ice. And that's something that I think goalies have become ultra reliant on. They think that they've got to be on the ice 3 hours a day to be prepared. And that's not true. Um, Really, what's become important now for goalies over the past couple of years is actually hip maintenance, right? So it's kind of like a baseball pitcher, and a pitch count, right? Like, you got to be able to preserve your arm and your elbow. Otherwise, you just burn yourself out and you need surgery when you're 20. So for goalies, it's looking at how do we maintain and manage our hips, but still get the cognitive training that we need to stay sharp. And that's where the VR training comes in. You put on the VR headset, you can just stand there. You don't have to be on the ice. You don't have to put a lot of strain or excess wear and tear on your hips. And you can just focus on tracking virtual pucks. And that is really what's helped keep me in shape. Again, maybe not so much physically. I've probably had one too many burgers over the past year. But most importantly, again, is just knowing that I've got the confidence to, when I do get back out on the ice, I'm going to feel confident because I know I've been training my cognitive skills using VR. And so I think that's the most important thing, is like any athlete in any sport, your creativity is one of the most important skills you're going to develop. And I know it sounds kind of like weird to say that creativity is a skill, but it's truly, truly valuable because you're going to be throwing all kinds of wrenches that are going to, alter your ability to train how you normally train. And if you're not able to adapt and be creative and find different ways to train the skills that you need to have success, you're going to be a step behind. And so VR is just one of those creative outlets that allow you to, allow athletes to train. It's amazing what quarterbacks can do with VR. It's truly mind blowing. You should look that up sometime. But for goalies, it's amazing to know that we actually have a tool now, and it's only been out about a year. But it's amazing to know that we have a tool where, again, we don't have to have 40 pounds of gear on. We don't have to be on the ice, and we don't even actually need shooters to train. We can just throw on the VR headset and boom, there we go. So that's been a huge edge for me personally, and I know a lot of other goalies as well over the past year, because that access to ice has been a lot harder.
Well, it's definitely a great story, and we just want to say thank you again for joining us. This interview is really incredible, and I learned a lot, and we're grateful to have you on. So thank you, Justin, for coming out and talking with us, and we will definitely pay attention to your Twitter. I'm not sure if you want to shout out your Twitters. I know there are many for Goalie Guild or your personal.
Yeah, I mean everything's at the Goalie Guild. So Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, those are kind of our three platforms. And again, I'll definitely say if anyone's looking for any kind of resources in the mental health realm, whether you're a goalie or a hockey player, Lift the Mask is a great platform for that. And I'm always here to advocate for mental health and wellness in athletes. So yeah, thank you guys so much for having me. Congrats as well. I heard Jesuit won their fourth straight championship. That's amazing. Third straight. That is unreal, man. That's really really cool. Congrats. I would absolutely. I think I played in one Jesuit alumni game like 5 or 6 years ago at one of the Dr. Pepper Star Centers. But I would love to come back to Dallas and get on the ice with you guys and work with your goalies maybe a little bit. So we'll have to try and set that up.
Yeah, we will do our best, and we'll travel the word. Thank you again for joining us.